Yeah, it's kind of funny how many things happen on Twitter. Actually, I last year at this time I was on Twitter and I was actually watching this conference, and Michael Westrate was here. Does anybody here last year saw Michael talk? Yeah. And he's like, "Oh yeah, reactjsday is it's this great React conference in Italy," and I was like, "Huh? There's a React conference in Italy? Like, man, I wish I knew about that." And so just be careful if you tweet something like this. The next year they might ask you to speak, and then you will be here. So that was last year. I was not here. I wished I could have been here, and so I was thrilled when Matteo reached out and asked if I wanted to present this year. Just by way of introduction, my name is Michael Jackson. I'm M. Jackson pretty much anywhere you go on Twitter, GitHub, NPM. And I am from California. So there's Los Angeles, there's San Diego, and then there's me, right in between them, from a little place called Carlsbad. If any of you like building with Legos, yeah? Legoland is in Carlsbad. Ah. Okay, so that's where I'm from. Nice little place by the beach. We enjoy it there. I live there with my wife and 4 children. Ooh, let's see, 12, 10, 6, and 3. She's actually 7 next week. So anyway, so that's my family, and I run a company called React Training. So I've been running this company now for just over 3 years. It's a company where I go around and I talk to people about React. So I go all over the world. I've been to Europe, I've been to Australia, all over the United States. I even went to Stockholm last year. That was, I think, the farthest that I've gone, or Melbourne, I don't know. But anyway, I go around and train different companies on React, and I also work on open source code. So we have a GitHub where we publish a lot of open source code. The most popular thing that I work on up to this point is something called React Router. Just by show of hands, how many people have actually heard of React Router? Oh, okay. Maybe it'd be easier. How many people have not heard of React Router? There you go. All right, so I'm speaking to you today. So React Router is it's a library basically for making web apps that lets you kind of navigate around on the web. It's not the first thing I've made. I've made a couple of things. Back in 2008, yeah, I know, I'm dating myself. I made a little thing called Shadowbox. It was like a modal for the web. Did anybody use Shadowbox here? Yeah! High five. Yeah. That was the first thing I ever made. That was 2008. And I remember when I was making it, my wife was like, "You're just wasting your time making that thing." And I was like, "No, somebody's going to find this useful." So you all are proof that it was useful and that it was good. And then between 2009 and 2012, I wrote a lot of really terrible Ruby and PHP code, not because Ruby and PHP are terrible, but because I was like, ooh, like instance eval, what can I do with this? And like metaprogramming and all kinds of craziness. And that didn't really go that well. In 2012, I wrote something called Mustache.js. I was working at Twitter at the time, and we were writing all of our whole app was written in Mustache.js. And then, of course, most recently I wrote React Router in this history library. And I also have this side project called Unpackage. Unpackage is a website where you can basically load stuff off of NPM that gets quite a bit of traffic these days. So this is the project that I'm going to be talking about today, React Router. It's an open source project. We started it in 2014. May 2014, I think, was when we very first put it up on GitHub. It's been MIT licensed before React was MIT licensed. So we were like the original MIT license library. And then React was like, we should do what they're doing, so we'll just do that. So we, we're open source. We've been open source since day one. And all of our work goes on here. As you can see, we have a lot of contributors. We have, over 500 people have contributed to the router. We currently have about 3 core contributors, so people who have commit rights and merging PRs and answering issues and things like that. It's downloaded a lot. We get about 5 million downloads a month on NPM, and it's used by lots of companies. I started making a list here, but then I was like, this list is dumb. Like, it's used by a lot of companies. So anyway, so React Router. One thing I wanted to do was kind of dive into. So I'm obviously not very good at slides, right? Just like white text on a black background. So one thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to actually dig in to the router a little bit, and I wanted to write some code with you. And because we released React Router version 4 last year, and it kind of takes a different approach than other routers that you might have used in the past, than like an Angular router or Nginx or Apache or Express or something that you might have used. And so I kind of wanted to go through and build it with you and show you kind of behind the scenes, pull back the curtain a little bit, and you can see exactly how React Router is built and the problems that it solves. Does that sound fun? All right, let's do it. Get out of the slides, man. All right. Yeah, there's the editor. That's the editor that we know and love. Okay, so I've got a React app here created with none other than Create React App. Okay, so this is just a vanilla React app out of the box. Hello, Verona. So when you're building an app, what in the world is a router for? Well, when you're building an app, lots of times you have multiple pages, right? So let's say we've got like a, oops, that's a new keyword, like a home page. Yeah. Oh, what do you want? What do you want it to be? Oh, what is it? Oh, it's called Tomorrow Night. Base 16 Tomorrow Night. Yeah. I've got lots of good color schemes. You and I will talk afterwards. Okay, so this is your home page, and then maybe you have like an about page, a contact page, whatever. Maybe you've got like a not found page, right? This is the one that you show people when something is not found. Okay. So we've got a website, we've got a couple of different pages on our site, and we're representing these pages as separate functions or separate React components, okay? And what we want to do is, as somebody navigates around our site, so if they're at like the /about URL, or if they're at like the /URL, then they're at the home page. If they go to some weird URL, then they're at the not found page, right? So we want to tie in the URL of the browser with the app, and as the URL changes, we want to change what they see in the app. Okay, so that's kind of the goal here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. I'm going to say in my render method, I'm going to get the location off of window.location. The location object is just an object that tells me what URL we're currently at, and I'll use a switch statement here and say switch on location.pathname. And if it is the slash, then I'll have a child component, and I'll say that child is the home page. Otherwise, if it is the /about, I'll say that the child is the about page. Otherwise, we'll just say we default to the not found page. Okay. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to look at the path name of the window location, and now instead of rendering this, we're just going to render a div, with the child component inside. Okay. All right. So if I go to the slash, I'm at the home page. If I go to /about, oh, what happened? Did I save it? Okay. I don't think I refreshed. So if I'm at /about, I go to the about page. If I'm at the slash, I go to the home page. If I'm at /something weird, I get the not found page. Okay? Great, right? Who needs React Router? Done. So this is kind of what a router does. And notice the nice thing about it is, as I hit the, I'm going to move this even further away from my mouth. Future speakers beware. The mic is hot. Okay, so if I go and I use the back and forward buttons now, you can see I'm navigating throughout the app, right? It's kind of cool. One thing that's not so cool right now is that in order to navigate through the app, I actually need to go and manipulate the URL. So let's get some navigation in there. Let's get some links. Ooh. If anybody can still hear after this presentation, I will be impressed. All right, so I'm going to have a href to the slash. And we'll say that's a link to the home page. And we'll have another one to the about page. That'll be the about page. We're not going to link to the not found page. That would be dumb. Okay, so we're going to have a couple of links here. So now we can use links, and we can use the back and forward buttons. Something that is, so that's a little bit better. Notice, though, if we go into the network panel, we're going to see that every single request that we make, oh, thank you. Somebody turn the volume down. That's excellent. So every single request that we make, notice, is reloading the page from the server. Okay, so that is not ideal. Okay, this is kind of the whole point of a React or of a router, a client-side router, is to build a single-page application, a SPA. That's a buzzword. So we're building a single-page application so that we don't have to send new requests to the server for different pages. Instead, we can just, change out the component that's in the page, maybe send a request to the server for some data or something to render the page, but we don't need an entirely new page. Sorry if I'm going a little bit fast for non-native English speakers. I should slow down. Okay, so anyway, so how do we prevent a request from going to the server? Well, if we had like an on-click on these links here, then what we could do is we could say in the click handler we could prevent the default. So here we're going to say event.prevent default. And this is to prevent a full page refresh. Okay? So now when you click a link, we won't send a new request to the server. Instead, we're going to handle navigation on the client. And so all we're going to do is we're going to use window.history.pushState. So this method has 3 arguments. The first one is state. We'll say for that for now is null. The second one is title, which doesn't actually work across browsers, so I don't even know why it's there. Welcome to the DOM. The third one is the actual URL. The third one is like the only one you actually want. Anyway, so event.target.href is the thing. So we're pulling the href attribute off of the target or off of the target of the click event, which is the link element. Okay. So go ahead and push that, and we're using client-side navigation. So now if I click on the About page, notice we didn't get a page refresh. The URL updated, but we still have the old content on the page, right? Somehow we need to refresh our component, right? So how do we re-render our component? We dispatch an action to Redux, right? Somebody told me that's how it's done. Or we could set state. Yeah, okay, so instead of keeping our location here, how about let's just keep our location in state. Just kidding, I love Redux. That was a joke. All right. Const location equals this dot state. Boom. Okay, so now that I've got it in state, now what I can do is I can say this.setState location with window.location. Okay? Excellent. Okay, now we're cooking with gas. So now I can click around on these links, and they're not sending new requests, and the content of the page is also updating. Awesome, right? Well, until we start to click the back and forward buttons, we can see that the URL is changing, but the content isn't yet changing. So we also need to listen for the pop state event. Okay, pop state is the one that the browser fires to tell us. So on component div mount, I'm going to say window add event listener for pop state. Handle pop state. I have been called the king of pop state before. I don't know why. I don't know what that is a reference to. It's so weird. I'm like, king of pop state? Whatever. So anyway, so handle pop state, and basically what we want to do in here is we want to set our location to the new location, right? So this is the event that the browser fires when we hit the back and forward buttons, or like the refresh button. No, not the refresh. Sorry, just back and forward. Okay, so now, refresh. Okay, so navigate around, hit the back and the forward buttons. All right. Now we really don't need React Router. Now, like, we got everything, basically, right? So after you've done this a few times, you might kind of start to identify some pieces of this that you could, like, I don't know, make into a component and, like, reuse across different apps, right? So one of the pieces that you could reuse is all of this, like, state management piece, right? So if you were going to build an app that was going to respond to the URL and know about, how to render something different based on the URL, you would have to probably write all of this code. All of this code essentially for you would be boilerplate, okay? So let's make our first kind of piece of React Router, and this piece is we're going to call this piece the router. So if you dig into the React Router source code, you will see some code that looks a lot like this. I'm just going to copy and paste that up there. What does a router render? So this is a great question. What does a router render? So there's a thing in React called context. Context is basically a way, so we're all familiar with passing props down. Context is basically a way for you to pass information around throughout the tree without passing props directly. It's kind of sneaky. You kind of go behind the scenes and you pass information around. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a context object. We'll call it our router context. And we'll say react.createContext object. And a router is going to render a router context.provider. And we'll say its value is just going to be this object with the location on it, this.state.location. And then we'll just put this.props.children in there. Okay, so that's our router component. So let's go and render a router component down here. Let's say return, and we'll put a router component here. And then, oh wait, let me just wrap it around this piece here. Sorry. There you go. Here's the JSX. Okay, so we'll put a router component in the tree here. Okay. So now, instead of getting the location from our own state in this component here, what we actually need to do is, on the other side of the context API is a consumer, okay? So if the router is the provider, then the consumer is the thing that gets the context, okay? I'm not going to go too deep into the context API here because there's lots of great docs on it online. You can read about it. But basically, the consumer API looks like this. So you render a router context.consumer, okay? And you use a render prop, a child prop to get out that context object and render something with it, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to take all of this stuff here, all of this logic that we had to decide which route to render. And now instead of getting the location from this.state, we get the location from context. And then we can go and just return this div from the router context render method. So return that div. Okay. All right, so again, in review, all we did was we took the common state management piece, okay, the piece that was managing that state.location, we put it in a router. Then we said, now anybody who wants to reuse this behavior, all they have to do is render a router, they're done. We're listening for the pop state event, so the back and forward buttons work, it's great. We're going to render a provider here that is going to provide the location to all of the descendants down here in the app. We've got a consumer that's going to get out that that location and render with it. So we should actually still be able to use all of our stuff here, except we're back to the full page refreshes because this .handleClick is not yet a thing. We moved that up to our router as well, right? So let's actually put that on context as well. So we'll just put the handleClick here. Let's call it something else to differentiate it. The click handler, this .handleClick. Okay, so we'll get the click handler here. And now, instead of handleClick, we'll just say click handler. Okay, who's still with me? About half. All right, we're good. We're good. Okay, so we basically just reproduced everything that we had before, but we extracted the router piece into that router component. Okay, so that is React Router's router component. You can think about it as kind of like a state manager, kind of like a URL manager. It's watching for changes in the URL, and as you click around on links, it's propagating changes back to the URL and reading them and letting you know, hey, the URL changed, so you can re-render. Okay, so that's one reusable piece of React Router. What about this switch statement right here? Right? Is there a way that, because that feels, to me, that feels very imperative, right? I'm basically saying, okay, look at the location and figure out what we're going to render based on what the URL is. Could we make that more declarative? What do I mean by declarative? So instead of just having a child component here, what if I had something like this? What if I had a route, and you could say, look, when the path is a slash, render the home component. Or when the path is slash about, render the about component. Or when the path is, you know, anything else, then render the not found component. Right? So if we had a component to express what to render when the URL looked like something, then it's essentially like a URL matcher, right? Then we don't have to write this switch statement. We don't have to have our own imperative logic all the time, okay? So I'm going to do this not found one in just a bit. Let's do this route right now. So all we have is two props, path and component. And route is going to look at the URL and say, if the URL looks like my path, I'm going to render this component, right? Should be pretty simple. It's like kind of like an if statement. So I'm going to make a route component. Oops, sorry. We've got path and component props, right? And I'm going to say this. Let's return. We need that context again. There we go. Okay. So we're a context consumer, okay? So let's go and get that location off of context. And what I'm going to say is, if location.pathname.starts with my path, then return react.createElement of the component. Otherwise, just don't render anything. It's just an if statement. It's just a matcher, just a URL matcher. Okay. We got a problem over here. Notice that when I'm at the home page, just the home component renders. But when I'm at the about page, they both render, right? It's because we're saying if the URL starts with my path. So this is one way that React Router works, and I'll tell you why. So what we're doing is we're saying render the home component if the URL starts with a slash. Well, guess what? Every URL starts with a slash. So that one's always going to render, okay? Because it's only matching the beginning of the URL. What we have, and that's useful because what if you had a component what if you had a route that was nested inside your home component, right? This is something we do with React components all the time. We nest them. We put components inside components all the way down the tree, right? We nest a lot of components. So if you had a route inside home, let's go and make one right now. Let's say this is a div here. Boy, what in the world? Anybody else here use Vim and every once in a while just think like, what the heck is happening? Yeah, that's me. That's me sometimes. All right, so what if we had a route here that was like, I don't know, news. We'll have a news component up here. Return. It's not all fake. So yes, I'm an American, but not all news is fake news, right? Okay, so if the path is /news, need to change the battery? Yes. You want to reach in my back pocket? Yes. You want me to do it? Yes. All right. I tried. There you go. All right. Okay, so here's the thing. So we still want this component. We still want this home component to render because it might have a route inside it and a further path, right? But in this case, like maybe sometimes we don't want it. Sorry, this home component. But then sometimes we don't want it to render, right? So like we have this extra prop called exact. Okay. And so what we want to say is, look, if you pass this exact prop, if the route path name is not it's not an exact match, then don't render anything. Okay, so you can sort of opt into this very strict exact matching behavior. Okay, so we're just going to take one extra prop here in the route, and what we're going to say is, look, we matched if the exact prop is true, then the location path name must equal the path. Otherwise, I keep expecting somebody to reach into my back pocket here. Oh, got it. Yeah, no worries. Otherwise, we're just checking to see if the location path name starts with the path. So if we matched, oi, now what happened? Oh, news. Okay. So now when we're at /home, we're good. When we're at /about, home is not rendering because home is exact. Does that make sense? Okay. So we're pretty much like 3/4 of the way there to building React Router. Like we're just about there. If you look in the source, it's very similar to this. So we have a declarative way for matching on routes. How about these links, right? These links are these are kind of repetitive, right? Could we do a little bit better there? We'll notice that we always have to pass down this click handler, and we always have to have some text inside the link. Oh, sorry. So this switch statement totally went away. By the way, and we don't need this location anymore. Okay. So what if we had a more declarative way to render a link without having to pass this click handler all around? What if I could say link to the home page and just say home like that? Right? So this one is going to go to /about, and it will link to the about page. Okay? We're just building a little abstraction on top of this anchor element. Okay? So let's go and make this one now. So the link element, let's see, it gets to and I guess children, which is the text inside the link. Right? Those are the only props that it gets. Let's return an anchor tag with the href equals the to value. And then the children just go inside. There we go. And now we need to wire up the click handler, right? Well, how are we going to get the click handler? Well, let's put it inside that a context consumer. We'll get context out, and we can say, look, when you click the link, do context.handle click. Okay. So we've got a consumer in the link that gets the click handler from the context. And so check it out. We actually don't need context down here anymore. Okay. Let's see if everything still works. So I click on home, click on about, It shouldn't be refreshing the page. Let me just make sure. I renamed the click handler method. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Everybody else knew that, but they weren't saying anything. They just wanted to see me fail. But you are my true friend. Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, so now we're not refreshing the page. Full page refreshes. Back and forward button works. Not bad, right? We're pretty much, like, this is like 99% of the way there now. You might be thinking, what could possibly be missing at this point? Well, remember we had that not found route, right? How are we going to do, like, not found in this situation, right? Because the route matches, but how do we say when something doesn't match, right? Okay, so these are the components that we've got up to this point. What we would like to say is if a route is like anything else, then render the not found component. Okay, and if you've ever tried to build a router for yourself, these are the kinds of questions that you start asking yourself, like how we do this? How do we do this? Well, we've already talked about how these routes are kind of like little if statements, right? They operate independently of one another. Okay, so if the path looks like this, then render. If the path looks like this, then render. And they don't know about their siblings, right? React components don't know about their siblings. They just know about their children, okay? They don't even know about the parents that render them, okay? They just know about their children. So we actually introduce one more component here called a switch. This is actually one of my prouder moments with naming things in React. You know how they say, like, cache invalidation is a hard thing and naming things is hard? I named that. Why did I name it switch? Well, remember that switch statement, right? That's exactly what this thing does, basically. It just goes through and it says, look, if the route's like that, then render this. Otherwise, if it looks like this, like this, then render this about component. Otherwise, if this one matches, then render the not found component, okay? So it just renders basically the first one that matches, kind of like a switch statement takes the first case that matches, okay? Oh, by the way, we never actually did the star, did we? Let's go up there and make sure that the star works. Well, so here for now, what we'll do with the switch is we'll just say the switch is going to get some children, and for now we'll just return a div with the children inside it. I'm going to go and make that star work real quick. Okay. So the star, what we want to do is we want to say basically here, if cover your eyes, some of you are not going to like this. So if the path is a star, then true. Otherwise, so we have, like, if the path is a star, then yes, we always match. Otherwise, if it's exact, then we're looking for an exact match. Otherwise, it's a nested ternary. Deal with it. It's fine. Okay, everything's fine. You can slow down your breathing. It's fine. Maybe you wouldn't approve it in code review, but I'm not on your team, so it's fine. Okay, so if we matched, if we're a star, we always match, right? So here's the problem: is this not found component now is always rendering, like no matter where we are, it's like not found. So it's like that. So that one's annoying. So what we want to do is, again, the switch is going to look through its children and figure out which one of these things is the first one to match, and whichever one is, then I'm going to render that one. Okay. So there's actually some kind of an interesting API that you might not have used before, which is, so we're going to get the, router context. We need to get the location, right? Here. Ooh. Oh, consumer. Okay, so we're going to get context. We're going to get the location out. Okay. And what we want to do is we want to basically duplicate this matching logic with all of the children components. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say react.children.forEach. So react.children.forEach is actually this is a utility method that React gives us, and it says, hey, sometimes you get this opaque children object, right? Sometimes it's a single element, sometimes it's an array of elements, sometimes it's undefined, sometimes it's a function, who knows what it is. So we're going to give you this for each, so you can use that to iterate over a children object. And we're just going to say, look, we're going to use that child's props. Actually, here I could just say this. Const path is child.props.path. And, oh yeah, const exact is child.props.exact. Wait, that's like totally what destructuring is for. Why don't I just use that? Again, be thankful I'm not on your team. All right, so the exact and the path. Okay, so now what we're going to say is this. We're going to say, look, basically, we're going to loop through the children if, let's see, if we don't have an element, we just want to find the first one that matches, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an element variable out here, and I'm going to say, look, if this thing matches, here we go. If it matched, then the element that we want to render is that child. That make sense? Okay. So when that's all said and done, switch is going to return, let's just say equals null. And switch is just going to return that. Okay, so switch is kind of an interesting element, right? It's basically just taking a look. It gets a lot of child elements, and it's basically just taking a look at them and saying, okay, which one of these matches the URL? Whichever one does, I'm just gonna render that. That's it. So if we go to about, get the about page, go to the home page, and if I go to some crazy URL, then I get the not found page. All right. So, I mean, that's basically, I think we're like 99.9% of the way there. We could probably figure out a couple more components if we wanted to throw those in, but I'm kind of running out of time. So anyway, I wanted to kind of show you kind of behind the scenes of React Router. That's actually how React Router works, and that's what a router is for. So there's, as you can imagine, there are lots and lots of different flows and things that you can design into your application. Things like checkout flows and sign-up flows. And as you're thinking about flows, I would encourage you to think about what is the URL going to look like, and to make sure that the things like the back and the forward buttons work, okay? And make sure that the page is always reflecting what's in the URL. And that's the purpose of React Router. Let me go back and tell you real quickly before I finish up here about kind of some of the stuff that we have in store for the future of React Router. So we released React Router 4.4 beta last week. This is like hot off of the presses. So it was released last week. We introduced some better compatibility with React 16. See, React Router is kind of in this weird spot because we still support like React 15 and the latest React 16. So it's kind of a tricky job. So it took us kind of a while to figure out the best way to do that. But we are fully compatible with React 16. In fact, even the latest React is out. We use the new React Context API under the hood, fully ready for suspense. So we removed all the component will methods and everything. So when suspense ships, hopefully next month. Sorry, October. Hopefully this one. Yeah. One last thing that I want to do before we release a final version of that is the React Router config package. For those of you who might be using React Router server side, we've got this cool package that helps you match routes statically before you actually render. And so you can go ahead and take a look in your server app. You can match the whole route tree and figure out, okay, these are all the routes that matched. Maybe we need to load data for them or whatever, so that we can provide that data on the client. Anyway, that's one more thing that I'll be working on before we release a final version of that. In the future of React Router, in the 4.x branch, we can look for better support for nested routing. So if you are familiar with the router, you might have passed around like this match object, and for doing relative URLs, you're like using match.path and match.url all over the place. So we're going to get rid of that in a future version of the 4.x branch. Also, better hooks for focus management. So if you're really into accessibility,
It's something that we care about a lot on the React Router project. We've had accessible links since day one, even though many people have tried to convince us to not use an anchor tag. We're like, forget it, we're using an anchor tag, we want to be accessible. If you have good ideas about how to make React Router more accessible, I'd love to hear them. But that's something that we're definitely working on in the future of the 4.x branch. And that's all I've got. So thank you so much for having me here.